Hello everybody, Zellerant here, and today we're going to go ahead and take a look at the unit Caris. She's a unit that will be coming out most likely in a couple months. Currently we have Akambe out, we have had Coco, and then Caris on the CN version came out after Sophia, August, Coco, Akambe, Hansa, and Homa. So we can expect some time before we get her. Now they have been changing things up. So there's always the chance she could come earlier or she could come later. The big thing with her is that she is not viewed as a tier 0 on the CN version. So she might be, I expect her to probably kind of be in the same area that she is currently. So I think we'll have some time before she comes out. Her kit is quite unique to her in that her trait revolves around her going into a powered up stage where then she powers up a lot of her unique moves to her. Let's go ahead and take a look at her trait here. So when friendly troops within 4 squares of Caris use a non-instant skill, they will gain 1 layer of implications. Implications a buff that's stacked up to 15 times. It doesn't actually do anything, but it cannot be dispelled or made immune. It can be triggered up to 5 times per round. And at the start of action, if she has 9 or more layers of this, then she will consume those 9 layers and gain the status light. And so what this basically means is it's it buffs, when she goes into the status, it will buff her exclusive skills to a newer, more improved version, which you'll see when we get to those skills. If it's a non-exclusive skill to her, it increases the range of that skill by 2 squares, and then reduces the amount of energy that it consumes by 1. Once she uses a skill that when she's in this state, it will lose this buff. So if it's one of her exclusive skills, as soon as she uses that exclusive skill, it'll downgrade back to its original version until she goes back into the light. So the big thing with that on her trait is you can only get this stacked up to 5 times per round. And you need 9 to actually get the skill. So the big thing is you're going to want to try and get this within 2 turns. Now, as you go up in stars, the big thing that you kind of see here is you'll starting with layers of that implication. So I think it's on the 3 stars where you get your first major buff to it. I mean, it adds magic attack at that point. But you, at the start of battle, at 3 stars, you now will start with 6 layers. So it'll make it where it's possible to get into the light state within the first round. And then the other big part is when you get to 5 stars, and this is, if you get Caris, you do want to get her to 5 stars to really utilize her full potential. You also have it where it's 5 squares, so you don't have to have your units within 4 to accumulate these implication stacks. And then you start with 8 layers of revelation. And so you know that implications can be stacked up to 15 times, so by starting with 8, you can overcap it. And when you overcap it, you're just saving up for the next for her next round, so that you can probably get her into this state within the first round, and then possibly even the second or third as needed. So you should be able to rotate her fairly easily every 2 rounds into this light state, meaning you're going to pretty much have all her skills in their buff state at all times. All right, so now when we want to go ahead and take a look at her skills with all of that taken into account, we'll see that she starts her initial skill that she starts with is Corrosion Mystic. This is a skill I think a lot of people are familiar with, that the Dark Priest, I think that is his name, the Dark Priest, or I forget whatever he's called. He's on the Dark Light unit. It's an epic unit that a lot of people have been using for bossing. He had this skill, and it's a single target attack that deals 100% damage and inflicts 3 random level 2 debuffs for 2 turns. So I know everybody knows this is a great skill for, say, reducing their magic or physical defense, or when you're fighting the boss, you can reduce their attack or their magic attack. So an outright good skill for bossing. When it comes to Caris, though, you'll probably end up replacing this quite quickly because a lot of her exclusive skills are just outright better. Whether she's wanting to be more of using more of a support or more of a DPS. So when we go to her first level skills, on the left you have Light of Shelter. This is just a simple instant that restores 25% of a target's health. If the target is unharmed, then the effect changes, so it's no longer restoring health. Instead, they'll gain a damage +2 and a magic defense 2. So just a nice little support skill there. Then you have Life Devouring on the right. This is a single target attack that causes 150% damage and generates 45% life drain. So just a simple high hitting attack that heals her herself. When it comes to this, she's pretty good as more of a support, and they're a lot better when it comes to damaging attacks further in a kit. So on this one, Light of the Shelter seems like the no-brainer pick here if you're going to need her for support at some point. So when we get to the 3rd level, we're going to start seeing her more exclusive skills. So the first one here is Shining and Protecting All Living Beings. So this is a support skill that grants all allies within range of 2 squares of the target range. So she has a target range of 2 that she can select, and then all units within 2 of that will get Glorious Shield, which is a shield that is 60% of her magic attack value. So you can kind of think of this similar to Simona's physical shield, where she can give all the units within a certain range a physical shield. Caris can do this with the magic shield. Then it cannot be dispelled, and it lasts for 2 rounds. When possessing the shield, these units are also immune to immobilization. So a lot of things that would slow your units down, like ice and all that, they become immune to when they have this. And when she possesses, and we'll have to kind of click on this here, but when she possesses light, so when she gets the upgraded version of it, it switches to, the skill changes to the Light of Protection for all living beings. And so when you look at this skill here, this is so it's an upgraded version, so it's going to be very similar, but it's going to be better. So it grants all allies within 3 squares, so it increases the range. It gives them equal to 90% of her magic attack value, so a significantly bigger shield. And then it adds Regeneration 3, which is on the person's turn they regenerate health. And all effects last for 2 rounds, and while possessing the shield, they're immune to immobilization. And so without Light Oracle, so once she uses this, it'll drop back to the normal Shining Protection for all living beings. So basically, as it gets buffed up from her trait, when she goes into that mode, basically a bigger shield, puts regeneration on them, and then they have a bigger range of allies that you can hit with it. So that's an alright good skill. And then we have Punishment for All Crimes. Piercing, it's a piercing damage attack that deals 50% of magic attack plus 20% of the target's HP to all enemies within a 3x4 area in the target. And then when she has Light of the Oracle, the skill changes to All Sins Punished. So this is just another one of her exclusive skills where it changes. And the All Lights Punished skill here is it does piercing damage, so it increases the damage to 75% magic attack plus 30% of the target's HP to all enemies within a 3x5 area. And Light of the Oracle, and if it's not available, so it basically increases the damage and it increases the area by 1 more, so it went from a 3x4 to a 3x5. Alright, we're going to go ahead and take a quick look at these skills in action. There isn't really much to them. The first one is just applying a magic shield to your teammates. You can see she goes around them, she applies it, and you can see it just equips simple apply. So then we're going to look at the one where she does the damage attack. Kind of see the range here. And so it's showing both versions of the damage attack here. So I believe the one on the left is the downgraded version, one on the right's the increased version. You can kind of see, it's kind of hard to see the range, but you can kind of see the significant difference in the look of the skill too. So much bigger, and it looks a lot more grandiose, I'd say. But there's not much difference in terms of what the skill actually does. It's just kind of bigger numbers and larger range. Alright, when we go to her level 5 reaction skills here, we have Dark Shelter. Just has your standard damage reduction by 8%, and before being attacked, for every debuff the enemies have, an additional 10% of damage is reduced, so you can get up to 30% with that. So this is something you would pair with the Corrosion Mystic. But when it comes to her kit, I would always pick this one over here on the right, which is a reaction when she's actively attacked. Has that 8% damage reduction, but she also restores 1 energy. Karis is very, very energy dependent. So this one will be the absolute must pick, in my opinion, for her kit. And we'll kind of see here when we get to her skills on the level 7. So then we go up to the level 7, we have Glorious Guidance, which is a leadership aura over her. This is a leadership aura that applies to the Popple State units. It has that standard 10% and 20%, or 10% attack, 20% defense. And then the unique part is when the target has 4 or more buffs, the piercing damage increased by 12%, damage done is increased by 12%, and damage received is reduced by 12%. the big thing is this is conditional, so they need to have 4 or more buffs. But once they have that, it's a large increase to their damage, as well as the damage received is reduced by 12%. So outright good, especially if you're wanting to really build up your Papal States units. So someone like Beryl can benefit from having her in the team, especially if you're doing something magic heavy, since Caris is also a magic user. But then again, she is very magic or very energy dependent. We'll kind of see that with her next skill here, which is Purge All Evil. So this is a magic damage attack that you prepare for 1 turn. It deals 130% fire attribute damage to all enemies within 2 squares of the target range. It applies stun for 1 turn when they get hit. It increases the damage by an additional 100%. When attacking large characters, and what large characters kind of are, if you think of the bosses from the trials, those are basically large characters. When attacking them after the skill is released, skip turn. So it's just like Beryl's Meteor in that aspect. It takes a turn to charge it up, and then after she uses it on the next turn, she doesn't get to go again. But then when we go into her skill, and with this one, you're almost always going to want to cast this when she's in the powered up state, just because it has a cooldown of 2 turns, and you should be getting into that powered up state about every 2 turns. So this one, you should be casting it with this the enhanced state. And this one's basically the same thing with waiting a turn to cast it, 130% damage, 2 squares of the target range, it stuns for 1 turn. But the big difference is continue to attack the enemies within 5 squares of the target range and deal 80% damage. So it's an additional 80% damage there. Applies negative heal, negative move 2 for 2 turns, and then after it's released, skip turn, just like so basically your turn's over after that. So the big thing here is it's just doing significant more damage, reduces their ability to heal, and reduces their movement. So we kind of take a look at this skill in action. It's kind of hard to see here, but it's just a big AoE, as you know, that puts them into a stun state. So we'll kind of watch. So it actually has a pretty cool look to it. Looks like a giant blast from the heavens, hits all the enemies. As you can kind of see here, the enemies are dying in this case because it did enough damage, but you can see right above their heads the stun. So if it had not killed these enemies, they would be stunned and unable to move for that turn. And then as you can see here, when you hit a boss with it, the big thing is they're considered a large enemy, takes a significant more amount of damage. All right, let's take a look at her basic attacks here. We have the Charged Strike, which causes 80% damage, and the next skill damage decreased by 15%. Nothing special there. You kind of see this with a lot of other units on their basic attacks. But then you get to the one that's exclusive to her. This one is select 1 enemy within the cross range and deal 2 penetration damage of 30% magic attack value. And then you gain 2 layers of revelation, so 2 layers of her trait stacking mechanism. And then when you are in that state, when you're already in the light state, then this attack gets improved to the Light Enlightenment Punishing Evil. So it does 2 piercing damages of 40% instead. And instead of 2 stacks, it gives 4 stacks. So outright just makes it quicker to go into that state again immediately. So when it comes to her basic attacks, this one's, I think, fairly obvious on what you select for her. You're always going to select the Punish Evil. It just outright complements her entire kit in that respect. Alright, so when we take a look at the 11th skills, we have a passive, Asylum Seekers. When the player has no debuffs and 3 or more buffs, attack increases by 15% and defense increases by 30%. This one is very conditional in the fact that she can't have any debuffs on her, which won't be too hard to accomplish with her. But then she also requires to have 3 or more buffs. And it's only an increase of 15% in attack and a defense increase of 30%. I mean, this might have its situational uses. I don't really see it with it, especially because you're going to want other skills within her kit. And then when you look at her other skill at the 11th level, Crystal Energy Wave Cannon, it's a magic damage attack that deals 60% area damage to all enemies within 3 squares of the target range, and applies magic defense down 3 for 2 turns. So this one's a really good, I see this as a very good support skill that you can utilize with another AoE magic type dealer. You can use it with like Simona with her ice, or you can use it with the Meteor from Beryl. So this is just another one that you can apply in her kit, and it does it does a decent amount of damage to a lot of enemies within an area. So when we look at the weapons, one of the weapons that I see mentioned that's good for her, and it just depends on your build, is the Cornucopia staff. So if you're going into that heavy DPS role with her, she's going to want this staff, potentially. Now, if you get her up to 5 stars, that gets reduced, as in she gets that extra energy from her trait. And so her next best weapon, or her best in slot that I see, would be the Diffusing Prism, because a lot of her kit is built into AoE. So this is just the one that increases magic attack by 5%, or up to 10%, and then after casting an AoE attack, for each target hit increases the magic damage and piercing damage by 10 to 20%. She has piercing damage built into her kit, so this just outright makes her hit a lot harder. So that would be her best weapon. And then when it comes to her trinkets, I mean, you kind of have the standard ones for her. I'd say the Old Scrolls of August would be a good one. But then again, since she likes piercing damage, another one that might be useful for her would be the armband, the flying band, because this one does piercing damage equal to 12%. So that might be a good one for her. But kind of flexible on that aspect. But that's pretty much Caris in a nutshell. The big thing is you're wanting to try and get her into that state where she gets an improved damage and range on her non-exclusive skills, and then she gets an increase to the capabilities of her exclusive skills. When it comes to being a DPS damage dealer, the big thing is trying to spam Purge All Evil. But the big negative I see is that she's not quite at the level of damage that someone like Beryl can do. And she's a lot harder to use in that aspect. And she really wants 5 stars to maximize her capabilities, because that's what's going to make it where you can kind of stay in that state. And then you start with the 8 layers, so she can come out of the gate doing a lot of damage. She is definitely a unit that I do plan to pull for. It's just really going to depend on how my pulls go from here on. I mean, I've still got Sophia, I have August, and I have Homa that I plan to pull for. We don't know where Terra is going to be in this mix. He could be before or after her, depending on how they mix it up. But wherever Caris lands, she's going to be right in between a bunch of amazing units that kind of overshadow her. So my goal is to try and pull for her, but it really just depends on how my pulls go over the other units. She's definitely a unit that I really want to have. I mean, just having that aura alone kind of makes her kind of nice to me. Just because we do know we have some more Popple State units coming out on the CN version. We don't have their kits yet, but they will probably benefit from this aura. And then she has a lot of support built into her, so even if I wouldn't bring her as a full-on damage dealer, I think something like the Asylum Seekers could be quite useful. Or not Asylum Seekers, sorry, Crystal Energy Wave Cannon on her level 11 skill, basically giving them a massive magic defense down. So not only can she do more damage, but having someone like Beryl do a lot more damage, or Simona, just the massive buff right there. And then she has other little things like her Light of the Shelter, so you can kind of go a full sport side for her. So that is Caris in a nutshell. If you liked this video, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.